What happens when you put a man like Peter Griffin on a therapist's couch? What's the actual timeline from complete train wreck to multi-problematic? Today we're doing what no co-op therapist would attempt. We're actually diagnosing Peter, not just with medical labels, but with patterns, behavior, trauma, using evidence from the show. And yes, we're counting that time he fought the giant chicken as a psychiatric emergency. Pay close attention and you'll start seeing the signs you missed while laughing at his antics over the years. And by the end, you'll understand the profound life lesson Family Guy buried under all those cutaway gags, right between Conway Twitty and the evil monkey.
No, Dad, don't do it! He's evil!
Look, just trust me. This is all a huge misunderstanding.
Chris, I think we should give him a chance to explain himself.
No!
Let's get this out of the way. Peter Griffin is not just dumb. He's impulsive, emotionally chaotic, prone to extreme highs and lows, and maybe, most notably, he sees other people more as props in his sitcom than actual humans with needs and boundaries. So if we were to walk into his therapy intake session, here's what we might see on the clipboard. Impulsive control disorder? Very likely. Peter doesn't have a filter between thought and action. He doesn't ask, should I do this? He just does it. Usually with cartoonishly destructive results. His baseline is chaos first, consequences later. And then there's narcissistic traits. He doesn't plan to hurt people, but Peter genuinely struggles to understand that anyone besides him has an interior emotional life. When Mac breaks down, when Lois screams in exhaustion, Peter either shrugs it off or turns it into a joke. This isn't textbook narcissistic personality disorder. It's closer to what psychologists call emotional egocentrism, a kind of arrested development where you assume your feelings are the feelings. And that brings us to the biggest issue of all: unresolved childhood trauma. Peter's emotional stunting didn't come from nowhere. He was raised by a physically abusive, emotionally distant father. In Peter's Two Dads, we watch his biological father literally beat him into line. And what does Peter do with the pain? He internalizes it, models it, passes it along. Peter doesn't have the emotional language to process what happened to him.
Take a good look at yourself, Peter Griffin. You're a waste of a man.
Wait a second. These are criticisms.
So instead, he recreates it with his kids, with Lois, with everyone around him. It's textbook intergenerational trauma, just with more fart jokes and cutaway gags. But maybe the most exhausting part of Peter Griffin isn't his chaos, it's his learned helplessness. Whenever something goes wrong, Peter defaults to, well, that's just who I am, as if self-awareness is a substitute for actual growth. And look, we get it. Growth is hard, but it's not impossible. Which is why this next question matters. If Peter did go to therapy, what would that even look like? A good therapist would need to dig past the chaos and deflection, past the cutaways, the chicken fights, the manatees in the writing room. Peter doesn't need reparenting. He needs to learn empathy, how to recognize it, name it, not run from it with a joke. And here's the kicker. It wouldn't take forever. With consistent, structured sessions, CBT for impulsivity, group therapy for relational repair, and maybe a little EMDR for the childhood stuff, Peter could actually make progress. It would take time, a lot of time, but there's a human being buried underneath all that chaos. The scary part? Sometimes we see it. In the rare moments when Peter stops performing, stops joking, and actually connects, you start to believe it's possible. But the real question is, would he stick with it long enough to change? If Peter Griffin actually committed to therapy, not just for court orders or gags, but seriously sat down and tried, how long would it take to undo a lifetime of emotional sabotage, generational trauma, and unresolved daddy issues? Well, let's break it down. The first year will be all about creating structure. Peter has no emotional regulation and relies on cutaway humor to deflect anything uncomfortable. A therapist would likely begin with CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, to address Peter's impulsivity and constant deflection. They would work on identifying disordered thought patterns, teaching Peter to pause, just pause, before acting on every impulse. And this alone, minimum of 1 year. He would need weekly sessions just to accept that joking through trauma isn't a personality trait. It's a defense mechanism. This is where things would get harder. Peter's relationship with his biological father is at the core of his dysfunction. His desperate need for approval, his performative masculinity, and his emotional immaturity all trace back to one thing. He never had a safe male role model. Enter inner child work and possibly EMDR to process trauma from those early years. Peter would have to sit with the idea that maybe his behavior isn't just random chaos, but an echo of the way he was treated. This phase, 2 more years, maybe longer, especially because Peter has a tendency to regress the moment he feels uncomfortable, and his therapist will spend a lot of time just waiting for him to stop bringing beer to the sessions. Once Peter starts to take accountability for his actions, the next step is family therapy. Yes, Lois, Meg, Chris, and Stewie would be invited to participate. And no, it wouldn't go well. Peter's default strategy in relationships is emotional withdrawal, explosive humor, or gaslighting. Teaching him to actually listen, validate, and respond without deflecting would require intensive group therapy sessions. This is where he would start repairing his relationships, and it would be excruciating. But if he makes it this far, and that's a big if, we could finally start seeing glimpses of a Peter who's not just less bad, but actually capable of emotional connection. Estimated time, 1 full year minimum. Here's the truth. Peter will never be cured, but with ongoing monthly sessions, he could stay functional. He could learn how to be a father who doesn't default to jokes about Stewie being British, a husband who doesn't forget Lois exists until it's convenient, a man who, when faced with discomfort, pauses instead of reaching for a cutaway gag. That's not just therapy, that's growth. Final estimates: 1 year of CBT, 2 years of trauma processing, 1 year of family therapy, and a lifetime of maintenance. So the total will be at least 4 or 5 years of consistent therapy. Not a montage, not a single episode arc, but the real, long, ugly, awkward kind of healing that sitcoms never show. Here's the irony. For all his dysfunction, Peter isn't hopeless. He has moments, rare, fleeting moments, where he shows empathy, where he tries, where the joke stops and the man underneath peeks through. And that's what therapy would try to amplify. Because if Peter Griffin can get even a little better, maybe there's hope for the rest of us too. So what do you think? Would Peter ever actually improve in therapy? Or is he too far gone? Let me know in the comments below. Your diagnosis might be better than his therapist's. And let me know what Family Guy character needs a therapy deep dive next.